Hello and welcome everyone to our very first inaugural premiere, first time ever, Project Festival. The idea for project festivals for us here at Projectkin is to have a way that all of us can come together as family historians and genealogists with crazy project ideas we think we ought to just ought to happen, and we kind of need to think it through, talk about it with others, get the inspiration of others. And frankly, this kind of goes to the core of what we're trying to do here with Projectkin. So I'm Barbara Tien, and from my perspective, the fundamental mission that we're all about is to get people to tell their stories. I come out of a background in technology, and from my perspective, today's world has just such an infinite array of the ways that you can tell stories, that when it comes to the important stories in our own history and how they connect us with the communities around us, and they provide a way for the younger generations around us and the generations in the future to know what those stories are, where we came from, and how we're contributing to the community, how we've learned from the community, and some of the resilience that we've acquired and can pass on to future generations. So in today's Project Festival, I'm delighted to welcome three speakers who have stepped up to tell us their stories about their projects. And they are Tamara Bush, coming in from New Jersey, Linda Hines from Indiana, and Simon Davies from London, UK. Each of them has stepped up with stories to tell, and I want to be very tight with the time so that each of them has plenty of time to tell their stories. I've allocated each about 10 minutes so that we can describe the project in short, tight terms, and then have time to just openly discuss and inspire one another, because that's, again, what it's all about. So with that, I'm going to have you go ahead and go first, Tamara. Tamara, I've gotten to know you going back, I think it's over 25 years, when you and I were colleagues at a networking company, an early innovator in the world as, the World Wide Web has just been introduced. We'd been networking and in the networking business since the 80s. That is to say, there was an internet, but it wasn't the World Wide Web. And we have stayed in touch and checked in on one another from time to time. And when we got to talking about family history, bada boom. So today, Tamara has a long history in telecommunications and networking, and now computer vision and AI. And she has taken that kind of talent to her family history. So you want to take it away, Tamara?
Sure. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely. Let me
Okay,
move it
let's
because
go
I'm
ahead
having
and take
trouble.
this. So welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to meet you all today. This is going to be a really exciting time. So I wanted to, when Barb was talking about Project Kin, this was something that my family did during COVID. So our family lives around the world, mostly military members of our family. It's been a longstanding tradition that my grandfather went to the Naval Academy. My great grandfather went to the Naval Academy. My father went to West Point. Because we're military people, we tend to be a little scattered. But during COVID, our military family members, and I'm the next generation, these were my great grandparents, we wanted to get together and do presentations about our family that we could share with the younger folks that are in their 20s that never had the opportunity to meet these wonderful people or to understand their history. So what we did is we created some presentations we went through and were able to update. So this is my great grandfather Earl, my great grandmother Lillian, and we just went through some genealogy. I do both ancestry.com, plus I'm the family historian. I use PhotoMime to make photos of the photo albums that we have, and then they're all shared on a Google Drive. So we got together 3 times during 2020 to go through a presentation that was similar to this, to talk about the family history. My great grandfather was born in Holyoke, Colorado, very strong Irish ancestry. Both his mother and father came from Ireland around 1870, and talking about how we are able to, in this day and age, understand people where we don't have Facebook or other ways of viewing what they did. Let me just go to the next slide. My great grandfather went to Annapolis and graduated in 1913. My great grandmother grew up in Annapolis. Her father was, oops, where is it going? Was the facilities manager, and he had 3 daughters. Each of those 3 daughters married a man from the Naval Academy. Each of those daughters who had daughters, they ended up marrying men from the Naval Academy. So before Match.com and any of the other dating sites, all you had to do was go to a military academy and you could find a Wells woman to marry. So the reason that we started this, I was going through ancestry.com to look up all the dates that my great grandparents were married, and my great grandmother had been married before. Nobody in the family knew it. So it was kind of interesting to find that out. My great grandparents, after they were married, they had my grandmother, and then they moved to Haiti for a number of years. When my great grandfather was the chief engineer in Haiti. This was particularly interesting. A year and a half ago, New York Times was doing an article about the occupation of the United States military in Haiti during that time. This is my great grandmother with my uncle, and this is the great grandfather. And so we were taking all these photographs from their house. They had, this was their large home that they had outside Port-au-Prince. Naval attaché workers, along with some American Marines at a dining table. This is probably around 1924, 1925. This is my great grandfather down here. And then you can see in the next pictures some engineering photographs that he took because they were doing large building projects. That's what my great grandfather was very specific about. This is one of the pictures that I sent to the New York Times. This is actually the president of Haiti, right here located. Here's my great grandfather right here. And then when they did leave Haiti, this was a letter. This is part of our family archive that is translated, that we can see this. So we were sharing this with all the next generation, the 20 somethings that are part of the family. 2 of them have now gone into the Navy. So we still do have within our Enright family, a very large group of folks that have continued to be in the Navy. After they came back from Haiti, my grandfather was at MIT, where he got a degree in engineering. This was in the New York Times. He would go often back to his home in McCook, Nebraska, where his parents lived and his additional siblings, and give conditions and talks. And these were from newspapers.com. So I was able to pull those in. And those are part of our digital archives as well. More pictures from the 30s. My great grandmother, who looks like she married to Leslie Howard, who's my grandfather right here. And all her cousins, her female cousins, of course. If the cousins were male, they went into the Naval Academy. If they were female, they married someone who went to the Naval Academy. With her father. And again, for the kids that were watching these presentations, it was fascinating to see this 5-generation photo. This is my father, who was born in 1937, my grandmother born in 1915, her father, his mother, and his grandmother. I mean, my great grandfather's grandmother is in this picture. She died within a year after this photo was taken. More pictures of my grandfather, but it was interesting, even as military people, they would still continually go back to Nebraska or Colorado. This is my great uncle, who ended up going to the Naval Academy. My grandfather, the family lore was he had lost his eye in the war. No, he lost his eye from a BB gun. Kid had a BB gun and shot it through a hedge, and that's how his eye was lost. So making sure that the family history is all well known. This is during World War II. This is my grandfather on the left here, my great grandfather, his father-in-law. My great grandparents, they were from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So we had a lot of Mennonite in the family. But my uncle, I'm going a little too fast, was actually in utero during that time. He was born in April 1944. The family after the war moved to a variety of locations within Washington, D.C. This is the very famous picture of their dog, Duke, who was a bomb sniffing dog during World War II. And my grandfather brought him back to be a family pet. After that, they moved to Hawaii for 2 years, which my father really, really loved. My great uncle obviously went into the Naval Academy like everybody else did, married a woman whose brother was killed at Midway. And again, with this multiple generation photos that we were talking about. part of the family history was so many people were in the military, who did what, where, when. And some of the information that we were able to determine, my cousin Joe, who was that baby you just saw, was able to determine not only the rank and the years that some of these photos were taken, because there wasn't any information on the back of the photos. So this is my grandfather's younger brother was a priest in both the Navy and the Air Force. And this is my great grandfather here. This is probably at the funeral of their father. This is my Aunt Rosemary, whose brother was killed at Midway. Uh, Obviously, some really fun photographs where they're at Alcatraz prison with a priest. So that's interesting. And then here's Uncle Bud, who is the family priest, along with my grandfather and one of the other naval officers that were married into the family, along with my cousin, and who also went to the Naval Academy. This was also one of the things that we could not figure out within the family history, which was why was great grandpa with Hedy Lamarr, and where was this photo taken? So Google is very helpful if you take a photo and you can upload it to Google. I found all these photos of Hedy Lamarr. This was actually a war bonds event because my great grandfather was a rear admiral. He was able to get up close and personal with her, but we found that fascinating. And I was able to pick through Google Lens. I was able to find other photos of Hedy at these war bond events. Here's Greer Garson. Oh, Greer Garson and some of the other movie actresses that were along at this event. And this is her wearing the same corsage as well as that jacket. So using both Google Lens, we were able to kind of get some more information about this family photo that didn't have a lot of information on the back of it, but it was nonetheless pretty important to us. And I think my grandfather looked pretty darn happy to be standing next to her. We also have family photos that did not have a lot of information, that were probably historical in significance, but we didn't know where they were. This was my great grandmother launching a ship in the Philadelphia Naval Yard around 1947. So we were, who, what, why, when, and where, and kind of tasked some of the younger members to find more information about it. We still don't know which particular ship this happens to be. In the later years with my great grandparents, we saw that they were able to go on some different cruises together. They always had a boat and they always had a dog. I was able to find through ancestry.com. Obviously, you can figure out manifests of ships these days. They were going to visit my grandparents. You can see he said that he was where he was in Holyoke. That's where his birthplace was. And my grandmother was born obviously in Annapolis, but they were going to visit my grandparents in Hawaii when they were stationed there. So ship manifests are really important as well. And we've added that to the family digital asset history. After getting out of the Navy, my great grandfather was in charge of the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, which is now a very new, fun place to hang out with lots of new condominiums. But this was him talking to his secretary. And in later years, my grandparents were in Philadelphia after my grandfather passed away in 1961. My great grandmother lived in both Annapolis and Philadelphia, and she was a fantastic grandmother. She loved to knit for us. She is buried along with my great grandfather at Arlington Cemetery, and this is my cousin Pat, who was a surgeon in the Navy. So we routinely visit them on Memorial Day weekends and other events. And that's my use of Projectkin. So again, we did 3 different types of versions of this with great grandparents, other outside family members, and then specific occupations, because we are a pretty well documented family and we want to keep going that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. That's wonderful. And I'm begging the question, and I invite everyone else. We'll take a few minutes to have questions here. You talk about having done these presentations with your family during the shutdown of 2020.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's been a really wonderful thing to have done and engage the extended family in these conversations. And by the way, thank you for your service and your family's
You're
service.
welcome.
But have you looked at ways to keep this going in future years, and what have you considered to do that?
That's one of the questions that we have now. So the younger folks are very interested in that we did recordings as we're doing right now. So 2 of them who couldn't make it, they were watching and rewatching it. We haven't done a presentation like this in about a year, and they were asking, when are we going to get up to speed and get more information? Now that you can find out so much more information on the internet, there might be holes that we want to fill in. So that's actually one of the situations that we're running into as a family. We have a very large shared Google Drive where we have all the photos that they can access anytime they choose to, along with these presentations and the recordings. But then what? So if we're not on ancestry.com, it's either these presentations, or you have to go to Ancestry in order to kind of fill in the additional information. If somebody went to a particular party, or what that wedding invitation looked like, from newspapers.com. So that's the area that we're asking ourselves, how to make this more accessible.
I want to be real careful. I think you all know that for me, and my experience with Ponga and startups in general, I'm working really hard to keep Projectkin very platform independent. But there are solutions out there to do that. And we happen to have somebody here, Simon Davies, who can talk a little bit about that. But I also would emphasize ways in which this project independence, or rather platform independence, creates ways to go ahead and think outside the box, think outside the platforms. I'm doing a talk I haven't picked it yet, but probably September, about having tried to solve that same problem using a private podcast. I'm doing a private podcast with my cousins. Just started, and it's connected into my We Are archive. So we can talk a little bit about that later. Are there other questions and conversation we want to have about that, about what Tamara was describing? Go ahead.
That was amazing what you've got put together. And that's really wonderful for the younger generation, and encouraging them to be interested in it. Like, I wish somebody would have encouraged me when everybody was alive.
That was our concern. As we're getting older, we realized there are questions we should have asked our grandparents. What can we give the younger people as a facility to spur them to ask us questions, or to really understand the family history, where they came from, or where they would like to go to?
Yeah, that's great.
Simon, go ahead.
I had a question sorry, I thought I was mute. I've got a question on Hedy Lamarr, actually. She was in the news recently, wasn't she? Wasn't she an inventor?
Yes, she was. And that's why the whole family was protected, because most of the family are electrical engineers or military people, because we saw that. And she was the inventor of Bluetooth. So yes, we were really excited to have that connection with my grandfather.
I thought for a moment you were going to say that's what the interest was, that she worked with.
Oh yeah, that was
on that.
Oh no, she didn't work with them. I think she came up with the idea of that kind of randomness of pinging, but the entire family was really interested in the celebrity sighting of Hedy Lamarr.
I love the pictures of the engineering work, and I thought it's lucky that he was he had a camera and he wanted to record that sort of thing, because I mean, it was quite an effort to take pictures in that period, wasn't it? And especially shots of views and rather than just portraits.
Right, it's better than a selfie to take a picture of your bridge.
But to be able to imagine him in his work, when you equate the two together. And also the big in Haiti, because I remember reading Graham Greene, was it Comedians, which I think sort of a bit later, but it conjures up all sorts of quite sinister thoughts, actually. Haiti, I don't know how did he leave any memories of how he found it?
It was very it needed infrastructure, so that's what the United States Navy was supposed to do, was to build docks and to build the infrastructure to move supplies around the island. So that was what his responsibility was. It was like an offshoot of the Army Corps of Engineers here in the United States, where they have to build docks.
What years was he there?
This was 1921 to 1925.
That's right, yeah.
And so when they ran this article, it was interesting, in the New York Times, and I reached out to the writer and sent those family photos, if they wanted to choose to use them, or to even speak to my father, who's still alive, about what he knew of that whole process. My grandmother was very, very thrilled that she spoke fluent French and how difficult it was to move back to Boston after being in Haiti for so many years.
Well, I want to pause that one, as I think we're going to keep coming back to that topic, and particularly the image understanding and what knowledge is going to do for us, and move to our next speaker. Linda, I wonder if you're ready to take this on and describe. I know Linda is an artist, a craftswoman, artist working in textiles, and I had your whole introduction all set aside that I've stepped on. A genealogist, of course, and a textile artist. And her focus over the last 15 years has been diving into her genealogy and sharing these stories and personal essays on Hein's site on Substack, where we met through Projectkin. And you can also find her at lindahines.com. Lives with her hubby Dave and 2 kitties on a small piece of land, Happy Acres in southern Indiana. So Linda, do you want to go ahead and tell us what kind of project you're up to?
Well, I don't have a slideshow or anything. It's just me. And I have my mom's diary from the early 30s. I did not know she had a diary. Of course, I had a diary that she gave me years ago when I was a kid. But right before Dad died, Dad told me, he said, I have your mother's diary. She had died 15 years before that. And he said, I have your mother's diary, and I want you to have it after I die. And I said, well, I'll have it now. He said, I don't want you to read it. And he said, I don't trust you'll read it before I die. So when I die, you will get it. So my stepmother gave it to me. She didn't even know that there was anything like this. Anyway, I want to tell her story from the early 30s with historical information. And then somehow most of them can be related at how that affected my life or my childhood. I've been struggling with this. I've had this since 86. He died in 86. So I've had this book since 86, and it's probably the last 5 years I've been really thinking about what I want to do. And I've gone through all kinds of things. So my latest rendition of what I think I want to do, and the more I think about it, I really kind of like it, is one thing, and first of all, before I get into it, one thing, it was great that it introduced me to my mother that I didn't know. Now, my mom died when I was 21, so we were never friends. We were always mother and daughter. But it was really neat to see how she was, and I found out how much alike we were, how she was fickle with guys just like I was, and even with Dad. And here she said, I love Francis, and then the next entry she said, I love Henry. So, and that's kind of like how I was until I finally got smart, about 17 years ago. Anyway, one of the, like an example, she talks about her and Grandma going to baking school. And so I've done a lot of research on this baking school that, of course, is no longer around, and the company is gone. But when we were kids, it was always our house that kids came, and we played Foursquare and hopscotch. And Mom would always bake sheet cakes or cookies, and she'd always be baking stuff. So I feel like I can connect her love of her cooking from this class to what I enjoyed. She also loved to letter write, and I think she encouraged all 3 of us girls to write letters and have pen pals. And in her one of her entries, her pen pal had died, and she said, I feel like I've lost my last friend. And she was 18 at the time. And what I found is I researched and found somebody who was related to her, and I sent them, because she had the father's letter that he wrote to her saying, this is what happened to Irene and blah, blah, blah. And also had pictures and stuff of her. So they were excited, and they didn't know how they knew she died, but didn't know how. So that was kind of a real personal thing. Of course, I made a photocopy because I'm thinking maybe I'll need that for something, She also did, she was a seamstress. I mean, she didn't work as a seamstress. She sewed all of her clothes, and so she had many entries about shopping at Bacon's and where she'd get fabric, and she'd come home and make clothes, and she would describe them. And then I have pictures of her in those dresses and stuff, which is kind of neat. Not all of them, but some of them. But it takes me to fast forward to my time when Mom and I would go to Grant's department store, and she and I would pick out fabric for my clothes. But I never sewed. She was the one that did all the sewing, but she sewed all of my clothes that I wore until high school, out of high school. I don't think I wore anything in college that she made. But that was kind of neat. And I had asked her when I was older, I said, would you teach me how to sew? And she said, no, you have to learn just how I did. My mom, nobody helped me. And reading her diary, I don't believe that, because she talks about Grandma and I got this fabric and we're sewing it up. So she got help from her mom. But for some reason, she didn't want to help me. She also talked about national things. She talked about the National Recovery Act in 1933. And so what I want to do is talk about the history of that. And she talks about how she was dating him at the time, his hours were cut, and how the stores closed early and people were picketing, and her dad owned a company. He had to have all these meetings with the employees about what they were going to do about this thing that they had enacted. She also took a lot of trips with her friends, with my dad and their friends, and just short trips. One in particular was Vincent's, Indiana, which is an hour from here, and has the George Roger Clark Memorial. And she talks about how they got to walk on the bridge that just got completed. And of course, I have pictures of those and all the little trips she took a lot of them she talks about. I have the pictures I can refer back to. There was also the love story of how they did. I don't really know how they met. I found going through genealogy that way back they were connected, the two families, but whether or not that carried over, I don't know. But I know how, I know how it ended, and I know she pulled him back from Washington, D.C. And then the relationship between Mom and Grandma, we called her Mayo, between Mom and Mayo was a really close relationship. And in fact, Grandma, after her husband, my grandfather, died, they moved in with us until she had to go to a nursing home. And they did so much stuff that I didn't really realize when I was growing up how close they were. And that's what she wanted with me. And she talked about, when I was in college, let's see, she died right after I graduated from college. So she talked to me in college, she says, about how when Dad dies, you can move in with me and we'll live together like the couple the mother and daughter across the street. And that's the last thing I want to do is live with my mother. And it ended up Dad died way after, she died before Dad did. So she always wanted that relationship with me, as I was the youngest and I was around the longest. But I thought that was kind of neat. But that's where I'm at, just trying to see. I want the historical for people who are from my area, from Evansville, to know some of the history of things that happen. There's carnivals and all kinds of things that she went to. And of course, I've researched ads and, all the papers and stuff, and got a lot of interesting stuff. But trying to, I can connect some of them with my life. But how many I can, I don't know. Anyway, but that's kind of my project that I've been thinking about. And I'm looking at small vignettes. I don't, it's not going to be a continuing thing. It'll have to be topics,
That sounds
Anyway,
so
that's it.
exciting. That sounds so exciting. Do you see the artifact itself? Are the pages and her handwriting? Do you see that as becoming part of the piece as well?
Well, definitely, if I would do that. Of course, I've got other stuff, of course, pictures. And then it goes into, do I want to do art quilts about it? So that's a whole nother thing. But my whole problem with that is, what do you do with them? I mean, it's publishing a book or getting something, and there's nobody to hand this down to. I mean, there are no kids in my family. None of us had any kids. So there's no, the closest I have are second cousins, and I don't really know them. So everybody else is dead. So it's kind of like, the only thing is a friend of mine saying, well, if a lot of it focuses on Evansville, maybe you could do a show with, the pictures and talking about the area. And that is something, I'm thinking about. So, but, I think a lot.
I think the store having a place to share those stories, to know a designated audience, if you will, for a story is important to where it goes. But at the same time, never underestimate the importance of telling the story to you. And as we look back on these artifacts, I think about my grandmother's book I've talked about so many times. I never met her. She never knew me. She would never have any idea of what I have done with that. And, it may not be a direct relation to you, but there will be. Think about this, the importance of the storytelling to you. That's wonderful. I'm so excited about where you're going to head with this. Are there other comments and questions?
Are there any local history groups?
I'm sorry, any local history groups? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's we have a library here and there is a genealogy society, but they aren't, I'm not real happy with them because they're just pretty, they're pretty set in their ways, and it's a really old crowd. Not that I'm not young, but they're really old, and there are some younger ones coming in, but the Facebook page, you can't even post to it because they won't let you. And I emailed them and said, this is something I think they need to look at, to check out. And she said, oh, I can't do that. The person that gave me this said, I can't do that. And it's kind of like, so they just post what they want to post, and they're not flexible about their meetings. And every once in a while they do have not every year, but they have a week-long program, which is really good. But like I said, they're really a disappointing group. When I've met, like Hamilton County, Ohio, I just joined them, and they're, just so active, and, there's just, it's just kind of sad. But anyway, but there are a lot of people that are interested in history though. So if I would, and a friend of mine was saying, well, she says, if you get these together and they all relate pretty much to Evansville, she says, I'll help you get it in somewhere because it is historical. But that's, that's a lot of, it's a lot easier to write it than to create it in fabric. And that will make me happy.
I think you raise a really interesting question as a big picture of places. We struggle as family historians to like put some order and meaning and narrative to all of the artifacts that we've inherited and the stories that we want to pass down. But the flip side, as a larger community, of how do we make sure that all of those narratives have a home? And the old-fashioned worlds are changing, and the old-fashioned ways that many of the historical societies have been organized aren't ready for this yet. So I'm been steeped in technology, steeped in the potential of digital information, and I see potential there in ways to do that. I'm looking at you, Simon. And maybe it's a good time to kick over to you to pick up our third talk here and look about ways to be doing that. And I would especially one last comment for you, Linda, is quilts. Oh, quilts. Quilting is just such an art, such a storytelling, such a transformative to generations long before we had photography. And it distills itself into its own special form of narrative. But I think that's a wonderful future for the story as well. So bravo.
Thank you.
So you want to pick it up, Simon? So
sure.
Simon Davies, I've mentioned many times with my own familiarity with him, whom I got to know just as we were sadly winding up our Ponga platform. Simon is an entrepreneur with deep chops and far more success than I ever hoped or dreamed of with respect to what we were doing with Ponga, dating back to a startup work that he did that was extremely successful, and moved on from a career in engineering. And he has launched a couple years back now, weare.xyz, which is a remarkable platform, family archive platform. I'd encourage all of you to take a look at. It is, in full disclosure, one that I have moved my own archive into and been very happy with. And I pester your support people no end, including just yesterday, where they implemented what I suggested in 2 days. And yet he has been a speaker and joined us on many of our programs here as Projectkin, always very gracious about not pitching the business, and rather focusing on what we as members are all focused on, which is the family stories. So with that sort of convoluted introduction, let me step back and hand it over to you, Simon.
Thank you, and hi, Elaine. I recognize you, of course, one of our users. Well, thank you for that. So yes, I'm definitely here to talk about family history, my family history. And one thing I was going to say, actually, Linda, I'm going to actually look at a diary that belonged to the cousin of my grandfather, who he died in World War One, and he certainly had no issue. And it's been something I've been fascinated in. So I wouldn't assume that your second cousins who you don't know, if they're just interested in their own family history. I mean, personally, if I found a second cousin who had a parent with a diary, I'd lap it up. So let's see where that goes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, so you will see into my archive. So I can't avoid that. I'm afraid this stuff is in my archive, so you're going to see it. But this is not about the archiving solution. What I want to talk to you guys about and get some input in is, and this folder is very important. I'm on the committee of the Shropshire Family History Society, and I'm doing it. We're having a face-to-face get-together for our members in October. We had one last year, sort of first one following COVID, and it was fantastic just to actually see people in the flesh. It was amazing. I can't tell you. Just I don't know. It's just to be able to look at people while in a room when you're not directly communicating. And anyway, so we're doing it again, and I'm going to do a presentation on my grandfather's cousin, who was a Shropshire lad. On my father's side, we're all from Shropshire, farmers typically. And I have this cousin of my father, George Henry Jones Davies, born in 1888. He left a war diary. He died at the Battle of Messines in 1917, and I found this diary. There's a reference to it somewhere, and it was in the Australian War Memorial Library, and I contacted them. They digitized it and sent it to me. And that was amazing to hear this guy talk. And all this came about because I was just intrigued with how my family seemed to be completely unaffected by war. Like the Second World War didn't touch us, First World War didn't touch us. It just being slightly out of age bracket, not quite. And then, like, my grandfather was a district auditor, like an accountant, and that was really important during World War II. They needed people to count the beans and spread them out. But anyway, I got to my grandfather. My grandfather studied chemistry, and actually I realized now was working in a munitions as a chemical engineer. So that was a protected whatever. And so he didn't go to war. But then I looked sideways, and as this is my family tree, and that's my grandfather there. There's me. And as I go left, I go up to my grandfather. Amongst all these cousins of my grandfather, you start to get a few that go missing. And I got to this one family over here. John Davis, this is my grandfather's uncle. Well, he had this fine family. And you'll see here the first two were killed in the First World War. Actually, this daughter, she ended up in the mental asylum, the county mental asylum, after her youngest brother died of Spanish flu. So he didn't even go to war. So he had this absolutely tragic family. And I became very interested and fascinated with them. So I'll go to George. So if I look at George, I had his diary. And in my documents here, you can see I've actually broken it up into various sections. And Ron, just go straight through his story. What I'm going to get to is that I ended up researching what he did in the war, where he was, his life in the run up to the war, and then I visited Belgium in April with a friend, and we cycled around the battlefields, and we found the field that he died in. Really quite amazing experience, actually, very, very moving. I've minimized you and I can't see you now. How does this work? As long as you can see it, that's fine. I can't see you guys anymore. Great. So we cycle around the battlefield, and Barbara is referring to lots of different technologies for capturing stuff and explaining stuff. I have a drone. I love sending up this little drone, and that brings my son, gets him engaged. We've been all over Shropshire filming drone shots of villages and farmland from the air to get an idea of their sort of movements in the sort of late 1800s. And then the other thing, my other toy, most recent toy, is a 360-degree camera that takes 360 video, and I strap that on a mount on the front of my bike as I cycle around battlefields. So I'm putting together all this stuff, and there's far more than I need for a talk. So I just want to give you a taste of all the elements I've got, and perhaps I'd be grateful for some thoughts on the bits that resonate most that I want to pull out, because I could do a whole thing on the research effort. So if I go over here, I've written up an article on his final days. This is really a research log when it comes through. So well, first of all, there he is. So I've got this image of him, which I think is rather splendid. And I gave a background to World War One, a bit about how the war ebbed and flowed for anyone who didn't know about that. And then I've introduced the Battle of Messines, where he died, which led to the Battle of Passchendaele, which most people have heard of. I've explained the whole context of how that happened. And then I got heavily into trench maps. There's the Western Front Association has a site, and on it they have this tool called Trench Mapper, and it's an interactive, you can basically click and it will give you a list of the trench maps it's got, which will obviously be different years and months for that location or that area, and you go through all these maps. And I was able to look at maps of the area that he fought and died in, so that there's one of them there. And this is a large scale map of the whole campaign, but that's an original map from the military at the time. And then the other thing that I had were the war diaries, unit war diaries, and the unit war diaries are written by commanding officers every day. I can give you an example. Let's have a look here. I put some especially in a folder for you guys, so I can quickly get to them. But I've got tons of them. 36. There you go. So this is one page of the 36th Battalion of the Australian Imperial Force War Diary, and actually this on this page down here where it says killed in action, there's Private Davis there. So he was one of 5 people killed in action on that day. But that whole, if you go through this whole document, they're big, and there's one for every day. It has movements, battle orders, etc., etc. And then above that, you have the brigade unit war diaries written by the brigade commander, and that will have his view of the plan and how he's going to move his battalions. And then above that, you have the division one, and that will have hostile fire reports. And there's this whole web of information once you know where your guy, what he was in. And I should explain, he was in the Australian Imperial Force because although he grew up a Shropshire lad on a farm in Shropshire, he became a Methodist missionary. He trained as a Methodist minister and shipped out to Australia as a missionary, and that's where he enlisted. So he actually came back fighting for the Australians. And his diary starts in Australia when he enlists and has his whole training, and he ships out to Cape Town and then England, and then he's in training camp, and then you've got his accounts in a trench on Christmas Eve, and then you've even got these very haunting last lines. This may be the last time I write in this diary, etc. And it really is. So I've got these war diaries, unit war diaries. I've got his diary, which puts color on into the actual days, his thoughts, his feelings. I've got the unit war diaries, which really are describing exactly where he is, has movements and grid references, and you then need to go and find materials that show you how to interpret those grid references. They're not like normal ones. And then you have these trench maps to fit them on. So, and then those are pictures of the Battle of Messines that he fought in. Kicked off at 3:10 a.m. on the 7th of June with 19 colossal underground mines that they'd spent a year putting under the German lines, and 10,000 German soldiers were obliterated in an instant. And then they advanced, and he advanced from this place, Prowse Point. That's a unit war diary entry by his commanding officer, where he says D Company, which is my cousin, was on the left at Prowse Point in a deep, fairly safe place, a trench off Ontario Avenue adjacent to the Royal Engineering Dump. Here is a trench map from the time, and that pinpoints Prowse Point right there. And then this is a satellite view where I've painstakingly used Pixelmator Pro to trace all the trench lines on top of a satellite so that I can identify where it was. I found a video, like at Passchendaele Museum, I found a video. This is a stills from a video that showed these people walking up and down Prowse Point. And that was really quite spooky. And then there's me on my bicycle with my 360-degree camera. I'm standing at Prowse Point, and if you follow my arm, underneath that, going into that field, would have been the trench that he was positioned in, ready for the big push. And here it is after 0 hour, blah, 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 unit war diaries. And then I've used the ongoing diaries to map his progress. He goes from Prowse Point up to this position here, and then they attack this farm, La Pottery Farm, and they have to take Pottery Farm. And you'll see that there's all and these are the grid references that I was talking about. And the write-up by the company commander, they post on Ulster Drive is a trench name. So these are all trench names, and then Telial Farm is an actual farm. I mean, just this richness of stuff. So I've constructed a map. So I made this showing their attack and what they did and where they set up their posts, etc. And then again, I traced it. And then there was a respite, and they went off behind the line, and then they went back up to the front line. This is a division, I think, report where it shows they're in these. They were positioned. The 36th Battalion were in D Battalion area, and you're going like, what? D Battalion area? I went to the Great War Forum, where you have people with 40 years of research experience, and he explained to me. This guy sent me this map. He marked on it and said, "That's D Battalion area there, where your guy was." So suddenly I had this whole context for where he was. And that led me to ultimately making this very sophisticated map of the last movements of my cousin. So he was in this area, and you see that relay post there. He's going to die around about there. And there was a Red Cross report that somebody in that forum sent me this, and this refers to my Sigmund Davies, my ancestor. So basically, remember there were 5 people killed that day. One of them is this guy, and there's a witness report of him being killed in the morning, and it says how my ancestor gave the service at his grave, and it says where the grave was. But of course, he was a Methodist minister, so they asked him to bury them when they buried them on the battlefield. And this tells you where on the battlefield they were burying them. And the other report that I have says he was killed after Messines whilst burying 2 friends. So I know exactly where he was, and he was burying those 2 friends, and a shell landed on them. And another guy from the Great War Forum sent me this division report on hostile fire that places 60 rounds and various other bits of ordnance in the exact grid reference he was at the exact time. And so I know that he died somewhere within those grid references. He was billeted up here, just behind the front line. And this railway is for evacuating people, and there's a Red Cross station there. And he would have been burying them there. They would have been burying their dead there in temporary war graves. That's an aerial photo from the time, about there. And in fact, that's a picture of a railway literally in the area. And so you can see how they were transporting people back from the line. And so I sent the drone up, and he would have, somewhere in there is where he died. And I went and I scooped a bit of mud out, and I'm going to take that. This is the farmhouse he grew up in, and I have an appointment to go and distribute it in his field. So that's a write up of, yeah, that's real in-depth research of how you can get underneath a World War One person. But then, of course, there's his life, and his life is more than that. It's his early years. It's, you know, he was born in that farm, but why was he to two primitive Methodist believers, and yet he was born in a seaside town miles away. And then I worked out, oh well, his father basically got his 10-year younger cousin pregnant, and they went off to Aberystwyth to get married, and then had the child, and then came back and moved to a different part of the county. So there's this whole backstory to this guy, and this is more taken from his diary. So this article writes up more from his diary. This is account. You can see all the italics.
Right.
So I'm babbling on. So I just want to show you the other sorts of. Finally, so this is the 360 camera. So I'm dragging it. I can take any viewpoint I want, and that's a reconstructed trench at Prowse Point, and basically we siphon around the whole battlefield with this.
Wow.
Just find out part where I can move. And while I'm moving, look, I can just move it. It's amazing. Look.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of thinking I need to get and say, oh, I'm here. This is actually where that happened, and then superimpose that in some way. So that's one thing that I have, and then the one other bit of the equation that I have that I'll just show you is because I made a copy of it. Is that it? Well, there you go. So this is the drone footage. The drone's called Kevin, by the way. Don't know why. It's got Chris and Kevin. I think someone just put me on the spot, said, "What's he called then?" So I said, "Oh, Kevin." So this is drone flight, and Kevin is flying. Now on Zoom, it'll be very jerky, but this is the field here. There, that's where he died, somewhere in there. So the railway comes under my cursor through there. That's the Red Cross post, and tracks off up there. So I'll just pause that. If we went on Zoom, it would be smooth. But that's how I get this perspective, and I think it just adds a fantastic dimension to understand it. And when I was cycling around all of this, I mean, I was just trying to imagine everything, because the front stretch ebbed and flowed. Everything around us would have just been obliterated mud. And then the only other things I have are period photos. So I know these are those fields. I know exactly where that is. I know exactly where that is. That's looking up to the ridge at Messine across the River Douve that we cycled across. That's the railway. Oh, sorry. That's a bit of fun. It tracks my route, and I'll just show. I don't know if the volume's coming through.
You know,
I'll turn the volume off.
Simon, I think you have the
Sorry, I need to stop.
ultimate I think you have the
Conundrum.
ultimate example here of this mountain of elements and details to tell a story, but I think it's probably not unlike what a film crew has going in to tell a movie, you know, Saving Private Ryan or something like that. They may start out with a script and then go collect the materials. But you know, you with We Are and with your own projects are creating not only a way to pluck through to tell one narrative, but you're also collecting this library of information that others can keep coming back to generations from now to tell other stories. And I think, to me, that was one of the biggest aha moments of the difference between I am going to write a book and I am collecting materials for my family story, of which I may pluck out different projects. So there is one huge pressure of tell the story. But when you open it up and realize you are telling a story from this collection, and as you've created this wonderful way to categorize the information as you bring it in, you're allowing others to tell other stories from the same collected materials, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want. I mean, in the archive, it's very much about making sure that all the raw materials there, people can interpret it as they want, and then I'm making up viewpoints on it. Like one is the research journey, another is his life story in his own words. The thing I'm facing now is this talk to all the people at Shropshire in that I'm going to have what 40 minutes. What it's like I need to feel a lot more on Shropshire, so it's about Shropshire, so get across that this is a Shropshire lad. But do I go too much into you can get lost in the research stuff, as you could see when I was going through there. That it probably was started to get unintelligible, but it actually had a logical sequence to it where I was discovering, quite a depths of sort of expertise stuff as people helped me along that journey. But I think that's too much. That's unless you specifically are researching an ancestor and want to find stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've realized how much,
And that,
we're still learning how to live in a double clickable world, that not every word has to say everything, because any one of us can go in and dive in for more detail. You're planting rabbit holes. And you have so
yeah,
much there to tell. You're just telling one piece of the story.
I think the bit I want to do that I haven't done yet, you can probably tell from it, but is just give the essence of being there. Because I mean, I have to say that it was genuinely really moving. It stopped being. Even reading his diary, it was fine, but I didn't know him. Right, I'm hearing the words of the person, and I'm starting to judge his character. Oh, yeah, when I probably shouldn't judge it, but whereas when you're there, and you especially you've been to the Passchendaele Museum, and you've just seen and suddenly the words in his diary come forth, and you realize he died here. Like he literally was blown to smithereens somewhere near me, and it makes me cry a bit every time I go to it now. Whereas before it was my dad's my grandfather's cousin, which is just a distant factual thing. So I think the bit I'm excited or eager to do is the bits on the bicycle. It's like, how do I tame that and the drone, and old images? Because after I'd been there, that one picture I had where it says view across the river, the Douve Valley. It's like the Douve Valley is like 5 fields. I've been there. It's like that's where they were all like just standing up and being mowed down. And they're all still there. They're finding them all the time. They'll find a scrap of a person and now they'll DNA test it, and then they'll go and scratch their name off the Menin Gate because they've identified the body. And it's sorry, I'm getting a bit carried away.
No, I think go ahead, Tamara.
What you said there, Simon, is so powerful, and thank you for sharing this. I'm boggled by this as well, but this is kind of one of the situations that when I talk about genealogy, we do have, thankfully in our town, and hopefully Linda, you get one too, somebody who's like, remember it, old time New Brunswick, New Jersey, but you're bringing in the truth of your aunt, your cousin and his story. And even though it seems like it's more than 100 years ago, you're making him a live and vibrant person and giving him what he's due in sharing his story, sharing his location, his diary, and you're really recreating that person. And that's such a powerful statement, especially in light of what might come in the next 10 or 15 years with all of us in our AI world. That authentication is overpowering to me. I'm so impressed with what you've done. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. I think, yeah, I do like, something struck, I'm sort of a bit off tangent, but something struck me a while back, because wasn't quite sure why I was so intrigued into getting under people's skin. And I realized it's actually because I'm really scared of my parents dying. It's like, I want to make death not so final, like if there's a bit of us in all of them and we can bring them forward, then, and he became my cause celebre. It's like the most anonymous of them all. who never didn't have time to be anything particularly. You know, not that it's important to be anything, but to become himself, to discover himself. Anyway, he had one that absolutely the bit that really gets me in there is he's sitting in a trench on Christmas Day or one day either side of Christmas Eve, I think. And he's literally writing down his reminiscences of his childhood Christmases in the kitchen of that farmhouse that I showed you, and how Father Christmas comes through the door with a sack, and they have to dance and sing and kiss and cuddle, and he distributes all the presents, and how they never noticed that their father isn't there, and how mysteriously he turns up later, and how they promise as if their lives depend on it that they'll be good boys in the coming year. And he just has this line. Oh yeah, here it is. Sorry, no, he just ends with this line here. Look, this is it. This is the quote. That keener than ever, Father Christmas generally kisses all before, and he just puts, "Yes, those were lovely days." And you're like, you can imagine him sitting in a trench, just he's almost trailed off as he writes, as he gets lost in those thoughts, and then
Simon,
then
as you
oh,
go ahead. As you tell this
sorry,
story,
no.
I'm reminded of the expression is that people don't remember what you say, they remember how you've made them feel. And I think this is a great example where you have so many incredible facts that document that this is what actually happened in their own words, in their own, the reporting around them by contemporaries and so on. And yet it is the story that trails together that I feel like I could retell right now because of how you made me feel. The details of, what year even it all happened doesn't matter, because I see this young man and his origin story and in Shropshire, and then becoming a Methodist minister, going off to Australia, coming back. He's still a young man and he goes into the war. And then here he is. It's that moment when he is giving final rites as a minister after the death of colleagues that it happens. But his story is now retold here. And all of the ways in which you're telling that are facts that, technology prowess, but all the things that you can do, but it's the how you feel. It's like a movie. It's incredible. And, I'm going to wrap this now so that we can get this into the can as a recording, but welcome all of you to continue this discussion after the session. And I'm just absolutely thrilled with what this, I had a feeling this project festival idea had a lot of potential, and you all have absolutely shown that. I'm absolutely thrilled. And I want to thank all three of you in particular for having the courage to step up there and give the little talks. Tamara, Linda, Simon, thank you so very much for this. All of Projectkin is thrilled, and the many people who will view these recordings in the months and years to come will thank you. And I'm going to end it now and invite all of you watching to remember that we will invite you to come tell your story of what projects you want to get into in the future. So with that, I'm ending the recording.